She looked me dead in the eye and said, "If you can't respect the people I care about, maybe you shouldn't be here at all." The crazy part? Was my house. My money. My entire life she was standing in. I'm 32 and I work as a forensic accountant in Dallas. Most people hear that title and think spreadsheets and calculators, but my actual job is closer to financial crime investigation. Companies hire me when someone's hiding money, laundering funds, manipulating books, or trying to disappear assets during lawsuits and divorces. I basically get paid to find lies. And maybe that's why this whole thing bothers me so much now. Looking back, the red flags were there the entire time. I just kept explaining them away because I thought I was building a future with someone. About 5 years ago, I bought an old rundown ranch house on the east side of the city before the neighborhood exploded in value. Everyone told me I was insane. The place looked like it had survived 3 separate divorces and a small electrical fire. But I saw potential. I spent nearly 3 years rebuilding that house piece by piece. New wiring, plumbing, floors, Fiancée. I taught myself tile work from YouTube videos after 12-hour workdays. Most weekends I was covered in sawdust instead of out drinking with friends. By the time I finished, the place felt less like a house and more like proof that hard work actually meant something. Then I met Vanessa. We met at a graduate business networking event. She was 28, sharp, confident, and getting her MBA after realizing her marketing career had stalled out. I liked that she was ambitious. She liked that I was stable and established. At least that's what I thought. Our conversations felt real at first. Goals, careers, investments, long-term plans. She talked constantly about wanting financial independence and building a power couple kind of future. I respected that. Honestly, I admired it. A few months into dating, she admitted she was panicking about student loans. She was considering taking a second job because tuition was crushing her financially. I remember telling her, "Don't sabotage your degree trying to survive semester to semester. Focus on school. I can handle the rest." At the time, it felt like supporting my partner. So I started covering her tuition payments directly. Around 50 grand a year between classes, fees, books, and everything else. It was a huge amount of money, but my career was going well, and I genuinely believed we were investing in our future together. That's the part that makes me feel stupid now. A few months later, her old Toyota started falling apart. Transmission issues. Burning oil. Mechanic quoted almost 3 grand in repairs on a car barely worth that much. She was stressed constantly, crying one night about how everything in her life felt unstable. So I took her to a dealership the next weekend. Nothing flashy. Just a certified pre-owned Honda Accord with low mileage and solid reliability ratings. I paid for it outright and kept the title and insurance under my name for simplicity. She hugged me in the parking lot and said, "I swear I'll pay you back once I graduate." But honestly, I didn't even care about being repaid. When you're serious about someone, you stop thinking in terms of mine versus yours. Or at least I did. About a year into the relationship, her apartment lease ended, and moving in together felt like the obvious next step. She contributed where she could, groceries, utilities, little household things here and there, while I handled the mortgage, taxes, insurance, repairs, and pretty much every major expense. I even opened a shared household account to make things easier. Clean system. No arguments over bills. No keeping score. At first, it actually felt healthy. Looking back now, I think that's why I ignored the small things when they started happening. Because when you've already invested so much emotionally and financially into someone, your brain starts protecting the relationship before it protects you. And that was probably my first real mistake. Looking back, I probably should have noticed how quickly my life became our empire in Vanessa's mind. At first, it sounded harmless. She'd tell friends, "We bought a house in a great neighborhood," or "We're renovating the guest bathroom right now," even though I was the one spending entire Saturdays covered in drywall dust while she posted aesthetic coffee photos from the patio. Couples do that, right? They merge language, share credit, build together. So I ignored the weird feeling I got every time she said it. Still, there was this subtle shift in how she talked about my success. Like she had started treating my accomplishments as something she'd inherited instead of something I'd earned. She loved telling people how financially secure we were, how smart our investments had been, how organized our future looked. But the budgeting spreadsheets? What? The 60-hour work weeks? What? The stress ulcers during tax season? Also mine. I didn't say anything because I tend to be slow to judge people. My entire career is built around observing patterns before drawing conclusions. In my line of work, assumptions get you burned. You collect evidence first. Then you decide who someone really is. What I didn't know was that Vanessa's best friend was about to hand me all the evidence I'd ever need. His name was Marcus. And I genuinely cannot explain how much I disliked this guy by the end. Vanessa described him as her ride or die from college. According to her, he helped her rebuild her confidence after some messy breakup with a musician she dated senior year. She talked about him like he was this emotionally evolved genius who always understood her better than anyone else. The reality? Marcus was a self-described creative consultant, which from what I could tell, mostly meant taking black and white photos of espresso cups and pretending to be busy online. He had exactly 4 clients listed on his website. One was his cousin's tattoo shop. He drove an ancient BMW convertible that sounded like a lawn-mower fighting for its life every time it pulled into my driveway. Half the time it was in the shop anyway. The first time we met, I already felt something was off. Most people ask normal questions when meeting their friend's boyfriend. Marcus immediately started interviewing me like I was applying for ownership of Vanessa. What's your long-term income trajectory look like? What's your plan for work-life balance? Do you actually see yourself emotionally available long-term? I remember sitting there thinking, who talks like this? But he carried himself like he was Vanessa's protector. Like he'd appointed himself guardian of her happiness, and I was just another applicant being evaluated. And over time the comments got worse. Always indirect. Always wrapped in fake humor. If I took Vanessa out to a nice restaurant, Marcus would say something like, "Ah, that's cute. Her ex used to cook her these insane homemade dinners." If I planned a weekend trip, he'd bring up some spontaneous artsy road trip they took years ago and stare at her nostalgically across the table like they'd survived war together. Once I bought Vanessa a necklace for her birthday and Marcus laughed and said, "Classic finance guy move. Throw money at emotions." Vanessa laughed too. That part stuck with me longer than I expected. Because little by little Marcus framed me as the boring provider. The predictable adult. The guy who paid bills but didn't truly understand her. Meanwhile, he positioned himself as the person who connected with the real Vanessa. And honestly, she loved hearing it. That's when things started changing. She became more critical of my schedule. More dismissive about my work. Suddenly my career wasn't impressive anymore, it was obsessive. My financial planning became controlling. Me wanting stability became playing it safe. And every single time she complained, Marcus backed her up immediately. So did her friend Jenna. Those two acted like a permanent relationship jury. Whatever Vanessa felt in the moment instantly became objective truth. She deserves more emotional support. You're too corporate. You don't make space for spontaneity. You treat life like a spreadsheet. At first I defended myself. Then I stopped bothering. Because no matter what I said, they already had a version of me in their heads. But the part that really started getting under my skin wasn't the insults. Was the money. Marcus's BMW was basically a monthly financial emergency. Every few weeks something else broke. Transmission. Cooling system. Electrical issues. Tires. And every single time, he'd call Vanessa dramatically panicking about how he couldn't afford repairs and how losing transportation would destroy his career momentum. Then somehow money would disappear from our household account. Not her money. What? At first it was small enough that I barely noticed. A few hundred here. Then 800. Then over 1,000. Whenever I asked, Vanessa would wave it off casually. He's just struggling right now. He'd do the same for me. You make plenty of money. That last one bothered me more than it should have. Because somewhere along the way, my support had quietly stopped being appreciated and started becoming expected. It never started with huge amounts. That's probably why I tolerated it longer than I should have. $400 here. $600 there. One month it was Marcus's rent. The next month it was just temporary help, because a client supposedly hadn't paid him yet. There was always a crisis. Always a dramatic explanation. Always some giant opportunity supposedly right around the corner that would change everything for him. It never happened. Not once. And somehow, despite contributing almost nothing to our household, Marcus still carried himself like he was morally superior to me because he worked in creative spaces instead of finance. That part drove me insane. I was basically subsidizing this guy's life while he sat in my kitchen drinking my expensive bourbon and making passive-aggressive comments about capitalism. What made it worse was the entitlement. Not gratitude. Not embarrassment. Not even basic self-awareness. Just expectation. Vanessa would transfer him money from our shared account like she was paying a utility bill. He just needs a little help. He's between projects. You know, creative careers are unstable. And every time I tried to explain why it bothered me, she shut it down instantly. Marcus is family to me, Ethan. He helped me through the worst period of my life. You're being cold. That word started coming up a lot. Cold. Apparently, asking why another grown man kept living off my income made me cold. Eventually I stopped arguing because the conversations always ended the same way. Vanessa defending him, me looking controlling, and Marcus magically still having access to my money. But here's the thing people forget about guys like me. I notice patterns for a living. And Marcus was creating one. Every transfer. Every excuse. Every manipulative comment. Every little guilt trip Vanessa repeated back to me later like it was suddenly her own thought. It all started stacking together in my head like evidence. I just didn't realize yet how ugly the full picture was going to become. Then work exploded. About 8 months ago, I landed the largest case of my career. A manufacturing company had hidden millions in losses through fake vendors, inflated revenue reports, and shell transactions spread across multiple accounts. It was a disaster. 6 straight months of 80-hour weeks. Energy drinks. Takeout containers. Falling asleep on spreadsheets at 2 in the morning. I practically disappeared from normal life. But I cracked it. The CFO had been siphoning money through fake consulting firms while manipulating quarterly reporting to keep investors calm. Once I found the first inconsistency, the entire thing unraveled. And when the case settled, the payout was massive. Not lottery-level money or anything ridiculous. But enough that, for the first time in years, I felt like all the grinding had actually led somewhere. So I decided to celebrate. Not just dinner somewhere. An actual event. A real milestone kind of night. I invited my closest friends. My college friend Jake, who helped me rebuild half the house years earlier. A few co-workers who survived the case with me. Some mutual friends Vanessa and I spent time with regularly. I told her, invite whoever you want. I want this to feel special. The second I mentioned the budget, her entire energy changed. Suddenly she was planning this luxury showcase instead of a celebration. Custom floral arrangements. Imported wine pairings. Fancy charcuterie boards. Artisan desserts from some overpriced bakery downtown. At one point she said, "This is our chance to really show people the life we've built." And I remember something about that sentence rubbed me the wrong way. Because this wasn't our professional achievement. I was the one buried in work for half a year. I was the one missing sleep, missing weekends, carrying stress so intense I thought I was developing heart problems. But somehow, in Vanessa's version of reality, my success automatically became shared status. Still I let it go. Maybe because I was tired. Maybe because I genuinely wanted us to enjoy something together for once instead of fighting about Marcus again. So I threw myself into preparing for the party. I cleaned the entire property. Set up lighting in the backyard. Planned the menu myself. Dry-aged steaks. Homemade pasta starter. Fresh vegetables from the farmer's market. Jake came over the night before to help set up speakers and tables, and at one point he looked around the kitchen and quietly said, "You know Marcus is gonna ruin this somehow, right?" I laughed when he said it. But honestly, part of me already knew he was probably right. For a while the night actually felt perfect. The house looked incredible. Soft lighting across the backyard. Music low enough for people to actually talk. Fresh flowers on the dining table. Good food. Good whiskey. Good company. For the first time in months, I wasn't thinking about work deadlines or hidden fraud accounts or whether Marcus had quietly drained more money from our household account. I was just happy. Jake was telling stories about helping me renovate the house years earlier. My coworkers were laughing about how opposing attorneys reacted when we dropped evidence on them during the case. Vanessa looked beautiful, relaxed, glowing from all the attention. Honestly, part of me thought maybe things were finally settling down. Then Marcus arrived. 40 minutes late. No apology. No text. Nothing. He just walked straight into the house using Vanessa's key like he owned the place. That bothered me immediately. Not because he had a key, I already knew Vanessa had given him one for emergencies, but because of the way he entered. Casual. Entitled. Like he was doing us a favor by showing up. He paused near the kitchen and slowly scanned the room. I swear it looked less like admiration and more like inventory. Then he headed directly to the bar setup and poured himself a massive glass of the expensive bourbon I'd specifically bought for the celebration. "Nice setup, Ethan," he said. "Really shows what people can build when they prioritize the right things." Something about the way he said right things instantly irritated me. Like financial success itself was somehow morally suspicious. But I kept my mouth shut. Professional habit. I've spent years dealing with arrogant executives who try to provoke reactions during depositions. You learn patience. Marcus, meanwhile, immediately started performing for the room. Within 15 minutes, he'd somehow turned casual conversation into a lecture about creative authenticity and how modern professionals sacrifice their souls for comfort and stability. You know the type. People who romanticize struggle because they've never actually escaped it. He kept making little comments aimed at me without fully saying my name. Some people build careers. Others build meaning. Money can buy houses but not identity. Corporate success is just socially acceptable emotional avoidance. At one point, I caught Jake staring at him like he wanted to physically remove him from the property. My coworkers weren't much better. One of them actually muttered, "This guy serious?" under his breath. But I stayed calm. Because here's the thing. Guys like Marcus always think they're the smartest person in the room. Eventually they get overconfident and expose themselves. And Marcus was getting there fast. The more he drank, the more theatrical he became. Eventually he turned toward Vanessa with this fake concerned expression he always used whenever he wanted to manipulate her emotionally. "I just want to make sure you're really happy," he said softly. The entire conversation around the table started fading out. Because Ethan's obviously stable. He takes care of you. He provides. Every word sounded backhanded. Like he was describing a decent appliance instead of a person. Then came the pause. The deliberate one. The kind designed to make everyone uncomfortable. "But I don't know," he continued, swirling bourbon around in his glass. "Sometimes I wonder if you settled for security instead of passion." Silence. Actual silence. I looked at Vanessa expecting her to shut it down immediately. To laugh. To tell him he was being disrespectful. To defend us. Instead, she just sat there thinking about it. That part hit harder than the insult itself. Because it wasn't embarrassment on her face. It was consideration. Like maybe she genuinely agreed with him. I noticed Bella staring at Vanessa with this horrified expression. My coworker Ryan looked like he was watching a car crash happen in slow motion. And Marcus noticed too. He mistook her silence for permission. That's when he finally crossed the line completely. He looked directly at me, smiled, and said, "Let's be honest, man. She could probably do a lot better than you." The entire room froze. Even the music suddenly felt too loud. And in that moment I realized something terrifyingly clear. Marcus didn't think he was insulting me in my own home. He thought Vanessa would let him. The silence after Marcus said it felt unreal. Nobody moved. Jake looked like he was deciding whether to throw Marcus through the kitchen window. Bella just stared at Vanessa in complete disbelief. And Vanessa? She didn't defend me. That's the part one still replay in my head. She looked down at her plate like she was embarrassed the situation had become awkward. Not embarrassed that her best friend had openly humiliated her fiancé in front of a room full of people. Worse, for half a second I saw something on her face that made my stomach drop. Agreement. Tiny. Almost invisible. But it was there. And suddenly everything clicked into place all at once. Marcus wasn't the real problem. The real problem was that Vanessa had been quietly allowing this dynamic for months because some part of her enjoyed hearing that she deserved better, while still benefiting from everything I provided. That realization hit me harder than the insult itself. Because in that moment I understood something brutal. I had spent years building a life with someone who no longer respected me. So the polite host version of me disappeared. I slowly set down my drink, folded my hands together, and looked directly at Marcus. When I spoke, my voice was calm. Too calm. The same tone I used during depositions right before someone realizes they're about to lose badly. "That's an interesting perspective," I said. "I'm curious what metrics you're using here." Marcus blinked. He clearly expected me to explode emotionally, not respond like an attorney preparing cross-examination. "What exactly does better look like?" I asked. "Be specific." He smirked a little, trying to recover. "You know, someone more aligned with her creatively. Someone who actually understands her." "I see," I nodded. "So creativity is the defining qualification." "Obviously. And you believe you fit that category?" "Probably better than anyone here." A few people visibly cringed. I pulled out my phone. That's when Marcus's expression changed for the first time. Because suddenly he realized I wasn't arguing emotionally anymore. I was building a case. "Okay," I said calmly. "Let's use actual numbers instead of vague philosophy." Vanessa quietly whispered my name under her breath like she already knew where this was going. I ignored her. Vanessa's MBA tuition over the last 2 years. Approximately $98,000 paid directly by me. I looked at Marcus. Her vehicle. Purchased outright by me. Insurance paid by me. Now the room was dead silent. My mortgage, utilities, property taxes, household expenses, groceries, renovations, and shared discretionary account contributions over the last 18 months? I glanced down at my screen. Roughly 130,000. Marcus tried laughing nervously. Dude, nobody cares about keeping score in relationships. I held up my hand. No, we're way past that part now. Even Vanessa looked stunned at this point because I'd never publicly discussed finances before. Ever. But honestly, something in me had snapped. You positioned yourself as an expert on what Vanessa deserves, I continued. So I'm curious what exactly you've contributed to her future besides criticism. That's not fair. I'm still talking. Jake literally turned away to hide a grin. I opened another app on my phone. Now let's discuss your financial relationship with us. Marcus's face lost color immediately. March. $480 for BMW repairs. I scrolled. April. $620. June. Rent shortfall. August. Another rent emergency. September. Transmission issue. By now people weren't even pretending not to stare. I kept going. Total vehicle-related assistance over 8 months. Roughly $2,600. Total unpaid personal loans. Just under $3,000. Then I locked my phone and looked directly at him. You've spent the better part of a year insulting me while surviving financially off money I earned. Nobody said a word. Marcus looked genuinely panicked now. Not angry. Exposed. And honestly, that still wasn't even the part that hurt the most. Because while I was dismantling him in front of everyone, I kept waiting for Vanessa to interrupt me. To defend me for once. To say Marcus had crossed a line. She never did. The room got so quiet I could hear someone set their glass down across the kitchen. I looked at Marcus and kept my voice perfectly steady. So let me make sure I understand your position. Nobody moved. You believe a man who financially supported Vanessa's education, housing, transportation, and future for years is somehow less worthy than a man who repeatedly borrowed money from her while insulting the relationship funding him. Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it again. Honestly, he looked shell-shocked. Like he'd walked into a debate expecting sarcasm and suddenly realized he was being dismantled point by point in front of an audience. My friend Ryan literally turned away because he was trying not to laugh. But the person I watched most closely was Vanessa. Because up until then, part of me still believed she'd finally see how insane this whole dynamic had become. I was wrong. She stood up so fast her chair scraped hard across the hardwood floor I'd spent weeks refinishing years earlier. And the look on her face wasn't embarrassment. It was rage. Not at Marcus. At me. I cannot believe you just did that, she snapped. Her voice was low and shaking. I stayed seated. What exactly did I do? You humiliated him in front of everyone. That sentence hit harder than anything Marcus had said all night. Not you embarrassed us. Not, this got out of hand. She was worried about him. I remember staring at her thinking, wow, I really misunderstood this relationship. No, I said calmly. He humiliated himself. I responded to direct insults with documented facts. This isn't a courtroom, Ethan. Her voice cracked loudly enough that conversations in the backyard stopped completely. This is supposed to be our home. Something about the way she said our home twisted in my chest. Because suddenly I realized she genuinely saw herself as equal owner of a life she'd mostly participated in, not built. And maybe that sounds arrogant. Maybe it is. I've thought about that part a lot since then. But in that moment, after years of sacrifices and support, hearing her defend Marcus inside the house I paid for while acting like I was the villain broke something in me. Our home. I repeated quietly. The same home where your friend just openly insulted me while drinking alcohol I bought after using money from my account for months? You always do this, she shouted. Now everyone was fully staring. You turn everything into numbers and evidence and transactions. I almost laughed at the irony. Because the only reason finances even entered the conversation was because Marcus had attacked my value as a partner in the first place. But Vanessa was too angry to hear logic anymore. Marcus actually understands me, she continued. He sees me as a person, not some long-term investment strategy. Bella physically winced at that line. And honestly, that one hurt. Not because it was entirely false. Maybe I did approach relationships too practically sometimes. But because she was saying it while defending a man who had directly benefited from my work for over a year. Jake had quietly started recording on his phone by then. Smart move, honestly. Marcus stood behind Vanessa looking deeply uncomfortable now, but he still didn't apologize. Didn't step in. Didn't de-escalate. He just let her keep burning everything down for him. You need every single thing justified, Vanessa yelled. Every feeling analyzed like it's one of your stupid investigations. I could see people exchanging looks around the room. Not because I looked crazy. Because they were finally seeing the version of Vanessa I'd apparently been refusing to acknowledge. And then she said the sentence that ended our relationship. She straightened up, crossed her arms, and looked at me with absolute certainty. Like she genuinely believed I'd fold immediately. You owe Marcus an apology, she said. Right now. The room froze again. And if you can't do that, she continued, then maybe you should leave. My own house. She told me to leave my own house. I'm serious, Ethan. Vanessa's voice kept rising with every word. You apologize to Marcus right now or we're done. Completely done. And the wildest part? She smiled after saying it. Not nervously. Not emotionally. Confidently. Like she genuinely believed she had all the power in that moment. Like she thought I'd panic at the idea of losing her and immediately back down. The whole room went silent waiting for my reaction. And honestly, I can't fully explain what happened in my head right then except to say everything suddenly became crystal clear. Not emotional. Clear. She was standing in my home at a celebration I paid for, defending a man who openly disrespected me while benefiting from money I earned. And she still believed I was the one who needed to earn forgiveness. That realization killed something in me instantly. Not dramatically. Not explosively. It just switched off. The love I had for her didn't disappear in heartbreak. It disappeared in recognition. I finally saw the relationship for what it actually was instead of what I wanted it to be. So I looked at her calmly and smiled a little. Not angry. Honestly, almost impressed by how badly she'd misread the situation. Okay, I said. Then we're done. The expression on her face changed immediately. I stood up slowly, picked up my drink and walked toward the kitchen. Behind me I heard her gasp like she'd been slapped. Because for the first time in our entire relationship, I hadn't responded the way she expected. People started shifting awkwardly around the dining room. Somebody muttered "holy hell" under their breath. I didn't turn around. There wasn't anything left to say. Vanessa ended up leaving with Marcus that night. I think she expected me to chase after her eventually. Probably thought I just needed time to cool down before apologizing. She had absolutely no idea who she was dealing with once I stopped viewing her as my partner. For the next 3 weeks I disappeared completely. No calls. No emotional arguments. No dramatic texts. At first her voicemail sounded annoyed. Then offended. Then increasingly panicked. I ignored every single one. Not because I was trying to punish her emotionally. Because once I make a decision I move forward completely. And during those 3 weeks, I handled the breakup the same way I handle fraud investigations. Methodically. The very first weekend I packed every single thing she owned. Carefully. Organized. Labeled. Clothes. Makeup. Books. Decorations. Kitchen stuff. Everything. I even photographed the boxes afterward because documenting property condition is second nature to me at this point. Jake came over Saturday morning to help change the locks and reset the garage and alarm codes. Best few $100s I ever spent. While the locksmith worked, I started making calls. And yeah, this is the part where some people think I became cold. Maybe they're right. First call, the university financial office. I explained that due to changed personal circumstances, I would no longer be covering Vanessa's tuition payments moving forward. Her next semester payment was due in less than 3 weeks. Second call, my firm. Vanessa had been lined up for a summer internship through one of our internal referrals. Good pay. Strong chance of full-time employment after graduation. I requested her removal from consideration due to personal conflict concerns. Position filled within 2 days. Third call, insurance. I removed her from my auto policy immediately. Then I canceled her authorized access on the shared credit account. After that, I contacted my attorney and started formally separating every financial tie between us. Shared expenses. Property records. Vehicle ownership documentation. Everything. This sounds excessive, maybe it was. But when your entire career revolves around watching messy separations become legal disasters, you learn quickly that clean paperwork matters. Especially when emotions get ugly. Finally, I sent one text. Simple. Direct. I requested the engagement ring be returned within 10 days. Then I mailed the same request formally because written documentation matters. And after that, I reclaimed the Honda. Since the car had always been legally titled under my name, there wasn't much she could actually do about it. The Honda situation became its own disaster almost immediately. The title was under my name. The payments came from my account. The insurance policy was mine too. Legally, the car belonged to me. So after removing her from the insurance coverage, I located it parked outside Marcus's apartment complex and had it towed back to my house. Completely legal. Vanessa absolutely lost her mind. The voicemails started the next morning and I saved every single one of them. Again, maybe that sounds cold. But documenting conflict is basically muscle memory for me at this point. The progression of her messages honestly felt surreal. At first she sounded irritated. "Ethan, this is ridiculous. Call me back so we can handle this like adults." Then angry. "You cannot just take my car. I need transportation. Call me immediately." Then confused panic started creeping in. A week later the university called me. They said my tuition payment was canceled. There has to be some mistake. No mistake. Then came the bargaining phase. "Please don't throw away 3 years over one argument. I know you're upset, but we can fix this. You still love me." That last voicemail almost got to me. Almost. Because part of me still remembered the version of Vanessa I thought I was building a future with. But every time I started doubting myself, I replayed the dinner party in my head. The ultimatum. The entitlement. The way she defended Marcus while treating my support like an obligation instead of a gift. And the clarity came back immediately. By the second week, the tone changed again. Now she sounded furious. "You're ruining my life over your ego." Which honestly told me everything. Because she still couldn't understand the difference between punishment and consequences. I wasn't destroying her life. I was simply no longer financing it. 3 weeks after the party, my front door camera sent an alert while I was working from home. I checked the feed. Vanessa. She looked exhausted. No makeup. Hair thrown together. Pacing on the porch while repeatedly trying her old key against the lock before realizing it had been changed. I'll admit something that probably makes me sound awful. I waited before answering. Not long. Maybe a minute. But I wanted her to sit with the reality of the situation first. When I finally opened the door, I kept the security latch engaged. The second she saw me, her expression shifted from anger to relief. Like she still believed this was salvageable if she said the right thing. "Ethan, we need to talk." "No," I said calmly. "We really don't." Her face tightened immediately. "You can't seriously end everything over one fight." "It wasn't one fight," I replied. "You gave me a choice. Apologize to Marcus or the relationship ends. I accepted your terms." "You know that's not what I meant." "Then you should have said something else." That silence afterward felt heavy. Not dramatic. Just final. And I think that's when panic truly hit her for the first time. "What about school?" she asked quickly. "What about the internship? What about everything we planned?" I shrugged slightly. "What about it?" Her eyes widened. "My tuition payment was due 3 days ago." "I know. You really didn't pay it?" That question genuinely stunned me. Like even after everything, part of her still assumed I would quietly continue funding her life regardless. "Why would I?" I asked. She stared at me like I'd betrayed her. Because in her mind I had. "Ethan, you can't do this to me." "I'm not doing anything to you," I said. "I'm just no longer doing things for you." She opened her mouth but didn't answer. And honestly, that was the first moment she looked truly scared. Not sad. Scared. Because reality was finally replacing assumptions. I started closing the door. "What about my stuff?" she snapped quickly, sticking her foot forward to stop it. "It's packed. Coordinate pickup with Jake." "You won't even talk to me directly now?" "No." That's when she completely lost control. Not crying. Screaming. "This is insane," she yelled. "You're destroying my life because your feelings got hurt." I opened the door slightly wider and looked at her for a long second. "You think you can just cut me off like I'm nothing?" she shouted. "After 3 years?" And maybe I should have softened at that moment. Maybe a better person would have. But all I could think about was how casually she tried to discard me in front of everyone weeks earlier. So I answered honestly. "You're right," I said quietly. "You deserved consequences long before this." That answer pushed her completely over the edge. She started screaming loud enough that I saw my neighbor across the street peek through their blinds. Not crying. Not heartbroken. Furious. Pure, offended outrage from someone who genuinely believed consequences shouldn't apply to her. "You can't lock me out of my own house," she yelled, trying to shove past the partially open door. I stepped back immediately and blocked the entrance. "No," I said evenly. "You lived here." Past tense. That only made her angrier. "This is my home too." "It was never your house, Vanessa." The second I said it, I knew there was no coming back from any of this. But honestly, I think we'd crossed that line weeks earlier. You paid utilities and groceries sometimes, I continued. That doesn't make you owner of the property. I'll sue you, she screamed. I'll take everything. And yeah, I laughed. I probably shouldn't have, but I did. Because the threat sounded absurd coming from someone who had spent years financially dependent on the person she was threatening. With what money? I asked before I could stop myself. That sent her into another meltdown. She cursed at me for another minute straight before finally storming back toward the rideshare waiting at the curb. But the breakup didn't end there. Not even close. For the next month and a half, Vanessa turned into a full-time problem. Mutual friends started reaching out trying to mediate. Her friend Jenna called crying once about how I was destroying an innocent woman's future. Marcus even called me personally at one point, which was honestly unbelievable. The guy spent a year insulting me while taking money connected to my income, then suddenly wanted to talk about compassion and forgiveness. I hung up before he finished his speech. Vanessa showed up at my office twice. The first time security escorted her out after she caused a scene in reception. The second time she waited for me in the parking garage and followed me toward my car while demanding we talk like adults. I warned her once to leave me alone. Then I contacted law enforcement. After documenting weeks of calls, appearances, messages, and third-party harassment attempts, getting a restraining order wasn't difficult. And before anyone says that was excessive, maybe it was. But once someone stops respecting boundaries, you stop assuming they'll magically regain them later. Meanwhile, reality finally started catching up to Vanessa. Without my tuition payments, she had to withdraw from her MBA program just months before graduation. The internship opportunity disappeared too. Turns out networking connections matter when you burn bridges with the person who opened the door for you. Last I heard, she moved in with Marcus because she couldn't afford rent alone anymore. Which honestly feels almost poetic considering how hard he pushed the money isn't everything philosophy. Because eventually reality hits. And reality costs money. Apparently living with Marcus full-time became a disaster almost immediately. Vanessa blamed him constantly for encouraging the conflict that destroyed her future plans. Marcus apparently resented her expectations for stability and support. It turns out romantic speeches about passion sound very different when rent is due. But here's where things get morally questionable on my side. Because even after everything, I still couldn't fully let it go. See, when you work in forensic accounting long enough, you develop instincts about financial behavior. Little inconsistencies start standing out automatically. And Marcus had a lot of inconsistencies. For months, he insisted people pay him in cash for photography work. Claimed he didn't trust banks, and preferred avoiding corporate systems. At first I thought he was just pretentious. Then I realized something else. Almost none of his business activity appeared legitimate. No registered entity. No visible reporting structure. No real accounting trail. Which meant one thing. Taxes. So I started paying attention. Not illegally. Not hacking anything. Just organizing publicly available information, old payment records, social posts, advertising, paid work, transaction histories Vanessa had used while transferring him money, things like that. And the deeper I looked, the uglier it got. Marcus had apparently been operating almost entirely off unreported cash income for years. No proper filings. No licensing. No accurate reporting. Just thousands of dollars moving around quietly while pretending to be broke whenever convenient. And once I noticed the pattern, I documented everything. And this is the part where people usually decide whether I'm justified or just vindictive. Because technically I could have stopped after the breakup. Instead I kept going. The more I reviewed Marcus's finances, the more obvious it became that his entire lifestyle depended on avoiding accountability. Cash-only payments. No legitimate business structure. No clear tax reporting. Constant money problems, while somehow maintaining expensive habits. Then I discovered something else. His apartment lease specifically prohibited long-term guests and unauthorized occupants. Vanessa had fully moved in. At that point, everything started collapsing fast. I compiled the financial information I'd documented and submitted reports through the proper channels regarding suspected unreported business income. Completely legal. Still petty? Probably. But legal. A few weeks later, Marcus got hit with a tax audit. And apparently the government reacts badly when someone spends years underreporting income while publicly advertising paid services online. The penalties were brutal. Back taxes, fees, interest, more debt than he could realistically pay. At almost the same time, his landlord started eviction proceedings over the lease violation after evidence surfaced that Vanessa had been living there permanently. Then clients started distancing themselves because nobody wants legal headaches connected to contractors operating in questionable ways. Within a couple months, Marcus's life basically imploded. He lost most of his work, lost the apartment. And according to mutual friends, living with Vanessa became a non-stop nightmare because she blamed him constantly for encouraging the chain reaction that destroyed her degree and career path. Honestly, part of me almost felt bad for him at that stage. Almost. Then apparently he left. Just disappeared one day while Vanessa was at work. Left a note saying he needed space, and moved back to Houston to live with family. So the guy who spent years talking about emotional depth and authenticity bailed. The second life became inconvenient. Shocking. As for Vanessa, she refused to return the engagement ring voluntarily. So I filed in small claims court. And yes, before anyone asks, I had receipts, valuation documents, payment records, and every related communication organized in chronological order. The judge ruled in my favor pretty quickly. It took close to a year through wage garnishment, but eventually I recovered the full value of the ring. A few months later, Vanessa actually tried contacting an attorney claiming financial manipulation and emotional abuse. That went nowhere once documentation got involved. Turns out voluntarily supporting someone financially during a relationship does not legally obligate you to continue after the relationship ends. Especially when the breakup itself came from an ultimatum they issued. Last I heard, Vanessa manages a retail store now and lives with roommates outside the city. According to mutual friends, she still tells people I destroyed her life over one argument. Maybe from her perspective that's true. Marcus eventually ended up working at a corporate photography chain making hourly wages, which is honestly ironic considering how much he mocked traditional careers. And me? Honestly, life got quieter after all of it. My friends still joke about the dinner party trial. Jake actually made me a t-shirt that says forensically verified out of pure stupidity. But if I'm being honest, there are still moments where I wonder if I crossed a line. Ending the engagement? I don't regret that at all. Cutting off financial support? Also no regret. But going after Marcus afterward, documenting everything, escalating until both their lives completely unraveled. Sometimes I tell myself it was accountability. Other times it feels a little too close to revenge. So now I'm asking strangers on the internet. IA for ending my engagement after my fiancée defended her friend humiliating me in my own house, and then making sure both of them faced the consequences afterward?